Welcome to Inform TV. I'm Alan Repke, Alexandria, Minnesota. Today we're going to look at perks that are being provided by our government to businesses and citizens that are enjoying the very best of times. Even though many Americans are very concerned about their future, may even be losing their home, may be unemployed, or wondering about their job. Yet our government seems to have taken the position that the more they help people of privilege, the better the economy is going to be. Now, our program mainly goes in rural America, and we're going to be looking at perks that are going to businesses, in some cases, make hundreds of millions of dollars. And we're in rural America here. The average farm wage reported by USDA is about $11 an hour, and here in central Minnesota and eastern North Dakota, $11 an hour is a pretty common wage. Yet some of the things that we're going to look at today, for example, one farming operation that was allowed to deduct a $1 million purchase of grain storage and eliminate tax. Yet the person that makes $11 an hour today, in a 40-year lifetime of employment, of driving to work on a daily basis on 2,080 hours a year, would not make $1 million gross for a lifetime. Yet we have government policies going on right now that have allowed the privileged to deduct or lower their tax rate by $1 million. So stay tuned. We've got some interesting things to show you now and in the future. First of all, the one thing we're going to look at is a program Congress and the administration has put together for advanced biofuels. Now, the Secretary of Agriculture said when he gave this money away to 156 advanced biofuel producers, this funding will help local producers increase the production and availability of renewable energy and thus help our nation begin to reduce its reliance on foreign oil, Secretary Vilsack said. Just as importantly, USDA's support will help to further develop the nation's growing biofuels industry and generate green jobs and economic growth. Now that's what they're giving this money away for. Yet at the same time, this administration has blocked a 36-inch pipeline coming across from Canada, bringing crude oil from Canadian sands as well as North Dakota, western North Dakota, the Bakken formation there, that is very promising to eliminate us from dependence on foreign oil. Yet the Obama administration has stopped that pipeline in its tracks. And so we're going to look at that in a future program that you do not want to miss. And we're going to look at what does this advanced biofuels go for, these 156 companies. And it's mainly people in the ethanol and biodiesel industry. And we'll give you one example that should really get in your craw. The USDA gave Cargill Incorporated $1,267,659 for anaerobic digester to make biodiesel fuel. In other words, $1 million grant. Just think of that. Does Cargill need a handout from the American taxpayer? I don't think so, nor do I believe you do. Yet at the same time, in this time of giving perks to the privileged, I looked at some interest breaks, as many of you and your neighbors struggle to keep their house or a car in these tough times. On December 1st, the U.S. Department of Agriculture announced that the new borrowing rate for commodity loans, in other words, if a producer or took a loan on the inventory of the 2011 crop, the borrowing rate that they could enjoy for a 9-month loan, in other words, to manage their inventory and to pay their bills with that proceeds, the average interest rate in December, if they took that 9-month loan, was 1.125%. Are you or any of your neighbors able to borrow government money for 1.125%? I don't think so. Yet at the same time, in accordance with the 2008 Farm Bill, interest rates for farm storage facility loans approved for December 2011 are as followed. A 1.5% loan with 7-year terms. So in other words, they could borrow money to put up a grain bin for a 7-year term or payment period, just as they could have done in November for 1.5%. If they wanted to take a 10-year loan from the local Farm Service Agency center that every county has and most of you people are aware of, they can take that loan at 2.125%. Yet at the same time, because of tax privileges they have, these grain bins have easily a 30 to 40-year life. Under present tax policy, they can write off the whole value of that bin, even when they can get a cheap loan. Or at least we should be checking how they handle the tax on that as well, I would think. And then if they wanted to take a 12-year loan, they could do it for 2.357%. In other words, a 2.4% loan. Now, why aren't you talking about that in your church basement and at the bar and the coffee shop? How do we have farmers enjoying the very best of times, being able to write off long-term purchases, write off their taxes, and still qualify for incredibly cheap money as people are losing their homes? The other example I want to give you today, as far as perks for the privilege, the USDA in December said the average farm worker made $11 an hour. Yet, when we look at some of the numbers on tax policy we have in the United States, DTN wrote a story on the best tax habits, and they said generous tax breaks for machinery, building, and farmland improvement won't get any better than this year, says a CPA for Larson Anderson in Minneapolis, and I think we've got the same firm here in Alexandria, Minnesota. He states, I have a client who put up $1 million in new storage $1 million in new storage this year, and he is deducting the entire investment. In other words, he is eliminating $1 million of a taxable income and ending up with an asset that will easily last 30 years. Just think of that. And that's not the only investment they can do. Farmers are allowed to do that on a big machine shed or a modern farm shop or even tile that they put in the ground, drain tile to drain excess water off land that will probably last anywhere from 50 to 100 years if they put it in right. Just think of that. They deduct it off their taxes 100%. Instead of being depreciated, in the case of tile, used to be 30 years, and these grain bins and hog houses and sheds were always at least 7 years, if not 15 in the past. Just think of the incredible perks that our Congress has given. Even if they buy something used, they can deduct up to $500,000. Now the government, Congress, and the President is saying this is to help the economy. Well, why not do the same thing then for the wage earner that makes $11 an hour? If you stop by many manufacturing in small towns or in a town like Alexandria, our Fargo-Moorhead market that we cover, don't you see that they need a lot of new vehicles? They're paying record prices for used vehicles. Why not give the same advantage to, instead of farmers that are enjoying the best of time, both in income and in appreciation of their assets, why not let some people with low incomes that can afford to make payments at least deduct a new car or new truck or at least a good used one? Wouldn't that be sound policy? Wouldn't that help the economy just as much as a brand new John Deere combine or tractor or a Morton building? Just think of that. And when we look at some of the other perks that are going on, they just continue to be whatever business needs to qualify for more profit. Congress and the administration has been there for a helping hand. And I'll give you an example of, in the case of Minnesota. Now, there's a record-keeping system, and I would say I would not rule them as the high-end people of the ag movement for any sense. They're involved in the University Center for Farm Management Practices, a database that shows this. Their group of farmers that do records through the University of Minnesota have whittled down their tax exposure an average from 2008 to 2010. They had net farm income. Just think of this. Net farm income, this particular group had net farm income of $432,000 for this 3-year period. But because of these special tax breaks, they were able to reduce the taxable portion of that down to $210,000. Wouldn't you like to buy a new vehicle or a new garage, some new purchase, and cut your exposed tax rate in half? The dollars that are available for that? And so we're looking at things that are continuing to be a perk for the privileged, because these guys are enjoying the very best of times. I'm happy for them, but why continue to shower them with gifts? Yet at the same time, many people don't have health insurance or don't keep their vehicle insured. They're just carrying liability insurance or not carrying insurance on an outbuilding in the backyard or something like that. Here we now have an area that I think also needs a major investigation, and that is insurance perks, crop insurance perks for our farmers. Now, the talk is with the Super Committee and those who've watched our program, Informed TV, with Alan Repke on a continuous basis. We've talked about some of these benefits people are getting, and the direct payments that the Super Committee and the Ag House and Senate Ag Chairman put a proposal out to cut farm spending over 10 years by $23 billion, in other words, $2.3 billion per year. Yet, one thing they did clarify to the taxpayer or to media or to the population is the fact that crop insurance, the subsidies as well as the cost, if they use true accounting principles, costs way more than even those direct payments they want to give. I'll give you an example. Right now, the 2011 crop that was just harvested, they're telling us, the Risk Management Agency now is estimating the taxpayer cost of subsidized crop insurance will cost the taxpayer over $11 billion. In other words, twice these direct payments that definitely should be eliminated, and but they're not talking about that. But we're talking about it in Informed TV. They're also not talking about the insurance industry that handles these payments. In the last, for underwriting gain for handling these subsidized crop insurance for the last 5 years, they've averaged well over $1.5 billion in gain. In fact, in the 2009 crop, they enjoyed a $2.27 billion gain. And in fact, this year, even though they think there's going to be quite a layout of indemnities because of market conditions and weather, they're still going to get $1 billion. Plus, for administrating these policies, they're going to get another $1.3 billion, when in reality, the Farm Service Agency offices that provide most of the data could do it for a small fraction of that. Yet at the same point in time, not only are we subsidizing perks for the privileged here, subsidizing tax breaks, that type of thing, it goes on to show that corn growers with a harvest price clause in their contract for 2011 will be compensated at a $6.32 per bushel, up from $6.01 from the spring planting price. And then they go on to say, in the case of soybeans, where prices have fallen, they're going to be compensated at $13.49. In other words, what I'm saying here, when the price went down, they were able to use the higher price for their crop insurance coverage, and when the price went the other way, in other words, not only highly subsidized insurance, they get the best price no matter what the market does. Just think of that. Are you getting that perk? The other perk I want to look at, when I talked about those low interest loans of 1.125% for a 9-month loan, right now, the outstanding balance of those is $2 billion. So we're not talking chicken feed here, people. We're talking perks for the privileged, an incredibly low interest rate on $2 billion. And the odds are it'll grow to at least $4 billion before all these loans are put in place. So just think of that. Are you getting that kind of privilege? The other thing I want to look at in our overall glance at government, and so you have a better understanding of some of the things your government is up to, we have in this area Senator Conrad, who is budget chairman, who hasn't presented a budget at all, and our president hasn't presented a budget at all. And to show you how incompetent this ripple of non-sound economics, whether the Republicans or Democrats, here's looking at the crop insurance program in Secretary Vilsack's budget that he threw out kind of a summary, I believe it is in February or January. For fiscal 2012, which is basically the 2011 crop, he doesn't show any cost to the taxpayer other than $59 million. But what does it show now? That the cost for the taxpayer is going to be over $11 billion. And yet he has got nothing for underwriting gain and administrative costs that I just showed you was over $2 billion. Where are these people coming from? Where is the watchdog on Congress and our administration? Where is the leadership? And one of the other things we're looking at, perks for the privileged, in this particular program, is the ethanol market. Now, we continue to hand out a 45 cent per gallon ethanol blender credit. And if and when I get my editing equipment, I'm going to show you what we've been paying for over the last 10 years. And anyway, we're still paying that out. It's finally going to end at the end of December. But the data right now shows that ethanol plants, remember, and go back to our website. I'm going to put things on there next week of these past programs you can send to your friends as well, or you can review them yourself, where I talked about this large ethanol and farm cooperative in Wisconsin that owns an ethanol plant. Right now, in the end of November and early December, and it's actually been going on for a couple months now, but here's a mythical plant showing that DTN tracks based on university data and industry standards, shows right now that ethanol plant should be making at least 66 cents per gallon. But that 66 cents per gallon profit does not include does include 32 cents a gallon for servicing long-term debt. I think you'll find the one in Wisconsin has little or no debt, and the one here we've got in Fergus Falls now that was bought out for cents on a dollar by a Nebraska group, they probably came in with cash. All these plants that I've talked about here in Minnesota on the ethanol producer payment program that ended up with over about a 12, 13 year period, ended up being reimbursed $30 million for the plants. Those plants, most of them have no debt, so they're making $1 a gallon. In other words, every bushel of corn that they're dumping right now, they're making about a $2.80 per bushel. $2.80 per bushel, because there's 2.8 gallons of ethanol produced from every bushel of corn. Just think of that perk, plus we're still subsidizing the blending of ethanol. And yet at the same time, the industry itself this past week was in a news conference, was questioned by media, not a tough-nosed reporter or an observationist that wants to get to the bottom of this wasteful spending and these wasteful policies. They said the 45 cent per gallon blender's credit that's going to go away really won't affect the ethanol producers. Now remember, 10% ethanol in every gallon of gas in the United States is sound energy policy. It gives us an alternative fuel supply. It gives the octane we need in the fuel anyway and gives us clean air. So 10% ethanol is sound policy, like we've practiced here in Minnesota for years. Yet the ethanol blender credit now, it's going to go away. And why has the industry said it's not going to affect them? One simple reason. We have a mandate now finally in place that's equal to putting 10% ethanol in all the gasoline in the United States, just like we've been doing here in Minnesota for years. So if we do some common sense energy policy and just mandating ethanol that's 113 octane, in other words, it makes the gasoline marketable grade level for the refiners and the the refiners and the terminals. It gives us a clean air additive with oxygenated fuel, so it burns cleaner, and it's a true alternative to OPEC oil. It all makes sense. But they're telling us now that it won't hurt them. Why? Because we're requiring it that 13-some billion gallons of ethanol will be in the fuel supply going forward from corn-based ethanol. And that's sound policy. And but why didn't we just make that sound policy decision a few years ago of putting ethanol in to be an alternative to MTBE that polluted groundwater, and all these kind of things. So when we look at perks for the privileged people, they are endless. And I'm just focusing basically on the ag end because it's easy to track the perks. Just think of the perks that Congress and our presidents have been giving to industry under the heading jobs. The reality right now, people, the perks for the privilege is what's driving our economy. It's not sound government policy. In other words, what I'm saying to you, sure, I'm working some overtime at my little weekend job so I can put Informed TV on for you folks and trying to get some solid information out to change government policy. But the reality is, capitalism must work on supply and demand and true need. These contractors, farmers, big businesses are making purchases based on an economy that's engineered. It's not an economy of long-standing, of an economy that takes care of itself. The minute you pull these tax breaks right now, what's going to happen in the farm sector? They're not going to buy anything. And why? They have enjoyed these tax breaks for so long, they don't need any more new equipment. The farm sector, for example, they wouldn't need to buy a new planter, a new combine, or a new tractor for 5 years. It wouldn't affect them a bit. We would get all the production we would need. They would get the crop planted on time, the crop harvested on time. But we have allowed incompetent economic and energy policy in this country to go on for so long. We've got an engineered economy now that when things go over the edge, as I'm predicting after the first of the year, because of perks for the privilege and incompetence in watching what actually is taking place and what needs to take place for an economy that flows up and down, and purchases are made by people who really need them. Just like I said about the worker, many of them need a new vehicle. I need a new vehicle. I've got a good old F-150 that's got 253,000 trouble-free miles, but that old Ford's going to have to be replaced in the very near future. But I'm not a farmer anymore, so I can't benefit from that super tax break. So why continue to give it to a farmer that doesn't need it? He's already got probably 2 new pickups and a new car in the shed. Why don't we have government policy taking care of people that really need it? If they're going to engineer economy, don't over-engineer it, Congress and the President. Make sure it makes sense. The other issue that when we have perks for the privilege, what are we going to do to modernize Congress to see that we get true leaders to replace these servants of special interest? That's the challenge, and one of our upcoming programs, I'm going to lay out a plan to modernize our Congress, to modernize and shrink our government in St. Paul. In fact, if you watch Channel 4, WCCO, they said now we've got to spend major renovation of the Capitol. Why not shrink the Capitol size to one house like Nebraska has, with one body of legislators and 45 to 60 people? We don't need 201 people in St. Paul. 201 incompetent people that shut our government down and have delivered policies that are just not doing the job for the average citizen that just wants a roof over the head and a fair shake. Thanks for listening to Informed TV. I'm Alan Repke. Continue to watch and go to informedtv.com for past shows and pass them on to your friends. Thank you.